FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. It's 1719. Well, the stock market is heading up, so life must be good again. Well, person you're about to hear from, when he talks about stock market, he puts air quotes or scare quotes around that word market. Is it really a market? Well, we'll see about that. Hey, as always, be a part of the show. Email us. The address is kl@kerrylutz.com. So getting back to those so-called markets, Chris Martenson's here with us now. Chris, welcome back.
Thanks, Kerry. Good to be back with you, all your listeners, too.
Hey, so what about that market, huh? It's got more dips and... I mean, hell, I felt I was on the Tower of Terror at Disney World when with those drops where the thing just drops 20 stories and it leaves your stomach up on the ceiling. This is not for the faint of heart, is it?
Well, no. And here's, the reason I put those scare quotes, as you called it, around the word market. Hey, market. Is that this hasn't been a market for a long time. A market is where price discovery happens. It's where legitimate buyers and sellers show up and they digest all available information to set prices for things. And that's how a fish market works. It's how a stock market is supposed to work. But ever since the elites, the plutocrats, decided that they could harvest more money from the masses by basically bamboozle them with and baffle them with bullshit, right? So what's the bullshit in our markets today? Well, it's all these computer algorithms like, oh, it's all algo trading and sophisticated proprietary, algorithms that, run sophisticated trading routines, full stop, timeout. These things have absolutely destroyed price discovery in our markets. We know this if you've ever watched any market closely, whether it's gold or silver or oil, it doesn't matter. You'll notice that these computers will come in and raid these markets in ways that have nothing to do with price discovery, right? A price discovering moment is not 2:30 in the morning when there's no bids out there and somebody decides to dump 100 times the available volume all at once to either crush the bid or the ask, right? That's a price manipulative moment. There are laws against that. The SEC has decided that's an okay thing, mostly because the people who are running these algorithms make a lot of money, part one. Part two is that those programs also are very easily contained and controlled. So if you want the market to go a different direction, you just throw $1 billion or $2 billion in all at once at a very cheap price, maybe even 100 million at a critical moment, just cheap price. And all of a sudden, these computers will see all that excess activity and chase it that direction. Very easy. So the controllers of the markets like it. Everything's great, right? So now let's step back a second. The Federal Reserve, in their inimitable wisdom, decided that had the house prices when they collapsed from 2007. That was a bad thing because it caused this thing called a reverse wealth effect and people didn't feel as wealthy and they weren't borrowing against what they were calling an asset. Although if you really look at home ownership, it's not really an asset for most people. It's a liability, costs money, right? They decided that those were the right prices. So we needed to get housing back up to those prices, not that those prices were false and the result of a bubble and a mistake. Those were the correct prices. Why? Because the markets had picked them. No, the markets didn't pick those prices. There was just price discovery was destroyed. So we had false house prices driven to a level the Fed said, hey, we got to get back there. So now just recently, stock markets are at inflated levels, huge bubbles all over the world. But in the United States, Powell, I thought he was going to be a different person, and he was for a little bit. He came out and said, hey, we're going to let our balance sheet run off. And, if the markets do what they're going to do, hey, that's OK. Well, the market started to hiccup. They threw a hissy fit. You had people, the crybabies on Wall Street, with their cheerleaders like Jim Cramer crying, oh, this is wrong. These prices should never fall. So we've got locked into this idea that once you hit a price for something, that's the new best price. It has to go back there. So Powell just last week completely abdicated, said, well, we might pause on rates. We'll have to see what, the markets have spoken and we don't like what they're saying. So we might, we're going to pause on rates, and we may decide to slow the runoff in our balance sheet too, which is a fancy way of saying keep all that money they printed out there. And the stock market loved that, right? So what we have now is a Federal Reserve that is 100% committed to whatever the last reference price is for whatever bubble they've blown. They said they're going to defend that. They're going to have the Powell puts now in place. Don't worry. We know we blew this market up to levels it should never have been. We know that the rich got stupidly rich at this. We know that certain insider firms like Virtu, Citadel, JP Morgan and the prop desk, that these players siphon billions, tens of, if not hundreds of billions out of that system. And that's what we're going to protect. We're going to protect that system as it stands, which gives us the largest and most unsustainable wealth and income gaps that we've ever seen in world history. And that's what needs to be preserved and protected. That's what the Federal Reserve stands for. That's what they're doing. They're saying, hey, we know the middle class has been wiped out. We know that people can't even afford to live in cities anymore because of the financialization that has brought companies like Blackstone in with cheap cost of capital to buy up the housing stock, drive up rents, drive up house prices. We know we've done all that. We know we've made life absolutely impossible and miserable. Hey, we see it breaking in France on a social contract basis right now, but that's okay. We're going to keep doing that because we're smarter than everybody else.
Yeah, well, ignorance got us into this mess. Ignorance will get us out. It's interesting that they've stolen hundreds of billions with no end in sight.
Yeah, none whatsoever. And they just don't know what else to do. It's, it's like that old Grimm's fairy tale or whatever it is about the frog and the scorpion, and the scorpion and the frog are on one side of a river, and the scorpion says, hey, I'd like to get to the other side. Can I ride on your back? And the frog says, no, you can't because you'll sting me. And the scorpion says, no, I won't do that. I won't because we would both die. That would be stupid. And so the frog agrees and starts carrying the scorpion across the river on its back, and halfway through feels this burning sharp pain. He's been stung, and they both sink to the bottom. And as they're sinking, the frog says, why did you do that? And the scorpion says, because I'm a scorpion. That's what I do.
And that's what they do. And
that's what they do.
Doesn't matter who's president. Nothing matters at all.
No.
Hey, Chris, what are you thinking about the Yellow Vest rebellion in France? I would have never thought the French would rebel. I always thought the Brits would maybe get their muster back, get their balls back, and really go against the powers that be. But it's the French doing it, and it's all aspects of the political system, all left, right, center. Everybody's pissed.
Yeah. France actually has a very long and storied history of rebellion, the French Revolution, on and on. It's actually in their DNA. And the French have also been squeezed a little bit harder than any other population out there from a tax basis. And then thirdly, they have a really vertical, very technocratic, very elitist sort of government structure. So it's all kind of primed. But the big thing is, if we step back and, we look past the tear gas and the fires and all that stuff. And by the way, awesome stuff happened last week. I'm a huge, huge fan of the Yellow Vest movement because it's ordinary people rising up and saying, you can take your neoliberal corporate policies and shove them. They're not working for us anymore. We can barely live. You've harvested as much economic oxygen as you can, and there's not enough to live on. Right. So that's fine. But what I loved, Kerry, was last week that they torched the gates to the Banque de France. Yeah. I love that, right? It's almost like the people understood where the shocks were coming from. They understood who was responsible, right? They weren't just, and they also dismantled red light speed cameras. They hate those things, right? They're just tax harvesting mechanisms by some other, name that they hate, right? So all these different sort of abuses and injustices, they figured out where they're coming from. They rammed a forklift through the gates of their economic ministry, right? So they get where the problems are coming from. They're not, the media, such as it is, likes to show, it's the police fighting the people, as if those two low-level actors were really the prime actors in the story. But the Yellow Vests are making sure to go after who's actually responsible. That's terrifying. I would invite your listeners to notice how little coverage that's actually getting in their press.
None here either. I mean, only on alternative sites. Otherwise, it's completely suppressed here, Chris. And that's another thing. Internet suppression seems to be a theme song for 2019. Censorship by these companies. I mean, evil is prevalent. Look at Google. They took "Don't be evil" out of their corporate charter or mission statement. You know, they're the most evil company now.
I think they should have just put a strike through on the word "don't" on their corporate motto, and they would have gotten it probably pretty close to right, because they are just evil now. Here, I heard that the yellow vest is spreading a little bit, and I wanted to find out. And apparently there was in Texas, a small gathering, I don't know, 30, 40 people wearing yellow vests, but they came to a courthouse and they brought a working guillotine with them and operated it on the steps, right? And so I wanted to find that because I saw that on my Twitter feed through, because I subscribe to a lot of different people. I like to know what's happening out there. So I saw that. So I go to Google and I type that in and I go to images, and all I got were images of like yellow vests that I could purchase, maybe life vests, right? So like, dang. So I back up and I had to really scour. And what caught me was that at the bottom, Google said, "Oh, here are some related search terms for you," and it directed me off to yellow jackets, Texas hornets. Bees. Like it got me into bees. It got me into insects.
Oh my God!
Purely. So I go to DuckDuckGo, and if people need to know about DuckDuckGo.com, it's an alternative search engine. Put the search term in, and I got what I needed right away. So Google is very actively suppressing anything that looks like questioning of the machine, of power, of authority. They got totally infested by the security services a long time ago, and they've been playing that power game for a very long time.
Well, look, I mean, we know that Facebook is the successor to LifeLog, which was a CIA program to document every aspect of your life. LifeLog was cut out the same day that Facebook was incorporated. I think it was in 2004, February of 2004, if memory serves me correct. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, Chris. I mean, conspiracy theories are one thing, but when something starts one day and the idea for it ends the same day, something has to be there, right?
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Egypt is on the verge, once again, becoming a world-renowned gold producer. The Golden Age is being rediscovered. For millennia, ancient Egyptian kingdoms prospered from unparalleled riches. Pharaohs built their empires and flaunted their abundant wealth that was made possible by the country's resource-rich gold deposits. Despite this rich history, modern Egypt remains one of the most underdeveloped gold mining countries in the world. Aton Resources is at the center of the modern Egyptian mining world, diligently working both as the only public exploration company in Egypt today and as the advocate for mining reform with the Egyptian government. However, those that arrive early like Aton will reap the best rewards. Aton's discovery of the legendary Lost Mountain of Gold at Rodruin and its current aggressive drilling program there could potentially reap those rewards. Aton Resources is focused on its 100% owned Abu Marawat concession in the Arabian-Nubian Shield, located 200 kilometers north of Centamin Sakari's world-class gold mine. Aton possesses first-mover advantage in the under-followed jurisdiction of Egypt, which is currently undergoing mining reform. To stay on top of Aton's latest drill results and news, go to atonresources.com. Aton trades on the TSX-V under the ticker AAN and on the OTC under the ticker ANLBF.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Well, of course. Look, sociopaths rise to power more often than ordinary people or healthy, well-adjusted humans because they have no shame. They have no moral guidance. They have no compunction. It's just right. Are they winning or losing? And they will do anything necessary to stay in power. And it's, you watch a documentary. I call it a documentary. Other people call it fiction, but a documentary like House of Cards, right? That's just really showing what it's actually like. And people who are in power will do anything. They have that Kissinger, Machiavellian, you have to break eggs to make an omelet kind of a worldview. And so to think that they were going to leave something as powerful as information to just sort of run free and naked and wild through the forest is a completely hopelessly naive view. Obviously, they're not going to do that. But Snowden helped us out years ago, releasing like what the GHQ was up to, in Britain, and how they have bots that totally own comment areas, and they set up all these false identities so that, if anything comes up, like if you and I wrote an article on the yellow vest that got out, say onto the Wall Street Journal, the comment section would become a horror show of what's called sliding, truth holes, astroturfing, all this stuff, and people would go, oh my gosh, I look at what other humans are thinking, not realizing that up to 90% of comment areas in key places are actually the result of either human or robotic astroturf efforts.
Mm-hmm. Hey, there was just one the other day of a tweet goes out of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez dancing when she was in college, and then all this faux outrage is drummed up in the press. They write articles about it. As it turned out, the tweet came from a brand new account made in January of 2019, and nobody out there had said anything about it, but they ginned up all this thing that the conservatives were outraged about it, and they couldn't have cared less. Nobody cared, and they got exposed. And that's just one small event that happens every single day of the year, Chris.
Well, let's take conspiracy theory and move it into the fact column, and let's talk about the Alabama governor race, where a company that has been very active in advising the U.S. Senate in congressional hearings, among others, about the threat of Russian trolls and Russian bots, that they had put $100,000 into a fake Russian bot series to sway the election, which they probably did. They helped to sway that election, and the New York Times wrote that up and sort of tried to downplay it and said, well, they only spent $100,000 in an election that spent $15 million. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, whoa, well, on a percentage term, $100,000 out of $15 million is actually pretty high compared to the $6,400 that Russia allegedly spent on Google in 2016 in a race where $1.5 billion was spent. So when you look at it on that basis, it was actually fairly significant, and they were running. But here's the thing, Carrie, they were running these things as if they were Russians so that they could then cut away from that and pretend it was Russians, but they got caught at it. And now the whole machinery is trying to downplay that as they called it. Well, we were running an experiment. No, you weren't. You were spending money to sway an election. That's not an experiment. That's called real life activity. That's what you were doing.
Correct. Yeah. So, it's you just can't make this stuff up, Chris. You
can't. Everybody's got to think for themselves and understand anything you're reading now. You have to ask yourself, first line of defense is this even real? Right? Yeah. Who's behind this? What are they trying to do? Right. Mm-hmm. It's just like I saw Tucker Carlson just last night had a great point where Nancy Pelosi comes out and says the wall, this is a moral issue. It's an immoral thing. This is not what America stands for. We don't build walls like that. That's not who we are. And he just had a guest on and he asked him, who was trying to defend this. He said, is this really a moral issue? Because I see here that Pelosi voted for money that went to walls in Israel and in Jordan and other places. And this guy tried to say, well, those walls are keeping terrorists out. And Tucker said, not the one in the south of Israel. That's just there to keep North Africans out. It's a wall with Egypt. That's what that's there for. There's no terrorism from the south. Right. So how is it a moral issue, Nancy, or other people, if you're supporting funding walls in other parts of the world, but not for us? And here's why that's a great point, because I think if I was part of the leadership structure and I wanted a divided, confused nation, because I didn't want them to figure out what was actually happening to them, one of the more confusing things you can do is present people with moral things that the cognitive dissonance, when you can't make a moral case for it. It's not a moral case. It has nothing to do with morals. Right. No. Right. If Nancy Pelosi, just to pick on her for a minute, but I could go to the other side of the aisle and do the same thing very quickly. If she cared on a moral basis about how people are being treated and received, why, she lives in a city, she lives in San Francisco, where people defecate on the street because they can't they don't have a place to live. We have homeless. We have vets who fought for our country and were wounded who are living under bridges. And she hasn't done anything about that. Right?
Nothing.
So now all of a sudden you have to ask, well, wait a minute. I'm being told by my leadership that we are a moral nation, but I can see that we're not, and I'm confused. And so what am I fighting for? What am I defending? This is the important point, because the critical piece here, Carrie, is if you don't want people to stand up and fight for themselves or for their nation, they have to live in a place they can't believe in anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it feels like is happening to me. People's desire to fight for themselves, for their nation, is being undermined constantly by people. I don't know if I wouldn't credit Nancy with necessarily being that smart, or people on the other side of the aisle. Again, I'm not partisan. I don't do partisan pox on all their houses, is how I mostly fall on this story. But they are running things, whether they are what do they call them? A useful idiot.
Yeah, useful idiots. That was right? The Russians.
So I feel like we've got a lot of useful idiots in power right now, but they're running a game which is very corrosive, and it's leading in a direction that I'm not happy with, because I don't know if you've seen lately, but we're picking all kinds of fights in the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait with China. I have no interest in fighting China. None. Zero. Zip. None. Yep. None. I don't want anybody I know to die in a useless war like that. I'd rather we took our defense money, such as it is, and actually turn it into real defense, right? If that means walls so that we can have national sovereignty and decide who comes in and not, that'd be great. I'm a big believer that we should have that we should control our immigration, because ultimately I believe the Earth is approaching its carrying capacity, and it doesn't make sense to me personally to have some areas of the world overpopulate themselves and say, oh, we'll be your relief valve. Just move here until the whole world is overpopulated. That doesn't make sense to me, right? Yeah. Or I believe that we should be taking some of our $700 billion minimum. That's what we know about. No black budget stuff. Military expenditures. Cut that in half. Spend $350 billion on, I don't know, improving the bridges in the town I live would be a great way to start. That would be one way.
Hey, there's so many things. And look, just giving the money back to the people who are paying it, and stop running up the debt, and let the people invest in the things that should be invested in, rather than having this kleptocracy going on, which is just maddening. And, maybe Trump has a handle on it. Maybe Q is real, and maybe Q is fake. I mean, it could go either way. It could go either way, but there has been a lot of truth in those Q posts. I don't know whether it's the real thing or not, but we'll have to see. But something is going to give, and to think that it could start in France, spread to the UK, spread to the United States, I think we'll be having yellow vest rebellions here really soon, or the equivalent thereof, because I think people have just had it, Chris. Hey, so we find you at peakprosperity.com. Anything special we should know about the site?
Well, yeah, come on by. We're talking about all things related to this and how to be prepared for what we think is a really uncertain future that's going to have a lot of chaos in it. And as well, we have our annual Peak Prosperity Summit coming up in April. That's out on the 28th, 29th out there in Sebastopol, California. Great place to be in April. And it's filling up quickly. So we're very happy to see that level of interest right now. But people should check that out if you want to get together with people who are capable of thinking and talking about things as they actually are. So that's our tribe.
All right. Hey, and as always, there's a link in the show notes to Chris's site, to peakprosperity.com. Make sure you go check it out, and make sure you send us some emails so we can find out more of your thoughts about what Chris has been talking about, the illusion that is perpetrated by the ruling class. Have you had enough of it? And what should you do about it? And while you're at it, if you're listening on YouTube, then we'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe, like, and share. Helps us out so much, helps get the word out. If you're just listening on a podcast, you can share it as well. Just shoot the link out to whomever, or just send them a copy of the podcast. We love when you do that. It really helps. Chris, we'll talk to you again real soon. one thing I can always count on is when we speak with you, we're going to get something interesting to think about. We're not just going to walk away and say, oh, that was interesting. So we're grateful to you for that. We'll talk to you again real soon.
Thanks, Kerry.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.